Welcome, everybody, and thank you for coming to the second of the 2024 Dean Significant Conversation Series. The first one we talked about the court ruling last year on affirmative action and different responses to it, faculty admissions, research, diversity, equity, inclusion, and so forth. Tonight, this afternoon, we're going to talk about new technologies, artificial intelligence in academic medicine. And of course, there's a lot of ground there. And we're going to conduct it the way we've conducted the others of these, and that is, with a little bit, I'll do 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe on a broad vision of artificial intelligence, potential future impact on medical practice. And then we'll get into different areas, whether it's medical practice or research or particular areas of research or education, and what might be happening. And we've asked each of our panelists to identify a problem and a possible solution. So our thinking is we move from raising problems and questions to maybe making a little headway toward possible solutions. I want to thank you all for being here, and I thank those who are here virtually. And let's see what we can do. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of the big picture, and I've given versions of this talk. This is a truncated version. I gave it in Rome last year, looking at the potential impact on the future of clinical ethics, education, and consultation as AI emerges. St. George's in Grenada, I gave a version of this focused specifically on medical practice, and medical education, and that's what this one's going to be more about, but again, a bit truncated. But I think it's a work in progress, of course. Unless we cease thinking, it will remain that. But I should introduce myself. I'm Mark Alicio, the chair of the Department of Bioethics here at Case. And didn't take it for granted that you knew who I was, but took it for granted that most of you have been engaged with the series, so you had some sense. My background is analytic philosophy, but I promise not to do that to you. And what I've really done a career in is clinical bioethics, so just to give you a sense. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT, what's the future of medical practice? And it told me, so I'm all set. And I think Dr. Griswold will, affirm that later on. But you can see, the answer isn't so bad. For certain types of questions, you go, that's not bad. AI is going to be important for drug discovery, treatment, personalization, predictive analytics, robotic surgery, remote monitoring, virtual health assistance, and almost anything else that somebody happened to put out there on the internet that the large language model swept in and crunched on a little bit, right? But it's not too bad. Where are we going? And happy Valentine's Day, and I won't say happy Ash Wednesday, but for those who observe, also Ash Wednesday acknowledged. But here we go. Maybe the future MD is Dr. Ava, ex machina. Not the most benevolent creature, would certainly violate an ethical principle of non-maleficence, I think, as we saw in the movie. Depends whose side you allied with, but a little bit worrisome there. But I don't really think this is where we're going, and I'll explain why, though I wouldn't deny that in some further, stretch of the arc, we might get there, but I don't think that's what's on the horizon. But other things are, and that's what we're going to talk about. So what have technological developments in medicine historically typically resulted in vis-a-vis work? That's what I want to focus on. A lot of futurists say, we're moving toward the end of work as we've known it, right? And it's easy to see that with some of the manual labor, but now we're starting to see it with, the worries about white-collar jobs and professional areas, and that maybe we're moving toward the end of work as we know it in those areas as well, just lagging slightly behind, okay? And I want to talk about a little bit what has happened between work and technology historically, especially in medicine, at least from my 30 or maybe 60,000 foot view. And then how will AI shape the future of medical practice? Because I see AI as importantly different type of technology impacting what we do in our professional lives, in our research, in our educating, and so forth, than lots of the other technologies we've had. I don't know if it's right to call it a difference in kind, but maybe there's a point where the difference in degree becomes a difference in kind. I don't know. Okay. Technology, medicine, and work. This is a picture of the infamous Tuskegee syphilis study participants, right? Egregiously racist, started in the early 30s, 399 African-American men. And it went on for years and years, and we could do the whole session on that, which we're not going to do. Even beyond when penicillin was discovered, and discovered as effective against syphilis, although the participants, subjects, whatever you want to call, because they were hardly willing, knowing participants, probably wouldn't have benefited from penicillin when it was finally, deployed against things like syphilis because they were too far along. But that's infamous. But what happens with the development of antibiotics, right? And vaccines. Fred Robbins, we got the Robbins building, did the groundbreaking work for the polio vaccine, right? Won the Nobel in 1954. I actually met him when I came here in 2000 to interview for a position here. And it was really amazing because he didn't need to give this baby assistant professor the time of day. And he spent a good 10, 15 minutes telling me why Cleveland was a great place, why Case was a great place, and why Metro was a great place, and why I should come here. And he did. It was really amazing, and I did, partly because of that. But anyway, vaccines create work. Antibiotics create work, right? Because we've got to get them out. We've got to manufacture them. We've got to prescribe them. We've got to. And people aren't dying as quickly or struggling with the same kinds of maladies, right? So we've got to take care of them as they live longer and deal with different kinds of issues, right? 50s. There's the iron lung. There's your poliomyelitis. Ventilators, transplants. This is the first transplant, 54 kidney, live kidney transplant. More work. And transplant takes off, right? Particular specialized kind of medicine takes off, right? The God Committee, infamous, but also an amazing breakthrough here that Scribner backed into. Belding Scribner, Swedish hospital, early 60s. Was annoyed that he had to keep looking for a vein in an artery to do dialysis as we knew it, which was done with a modified fuel pump and some filtering bodies. Developed an indwelling shunt, an on-off spigot, and was able to attach and detach over and over and over from the same sites. And it took him 3 or 4 weeks before he realized, oh my God, OMG, we'd say today, life-sustaining, life-extending technology, right? Big value issues. But then we got dialysis everywhere. It pops up, right? Act of Congress in 1972, I think. Universal access to dialysis in the States right away. Okay, talk about punting, right? We're in the 60s. We're having more success with transplants. We can keep people on what we called at the time respirators, right? Maybe we need to re-examine the notion of death. We need to do supply of organs. There's a lot rolled in here, probably many different kinds of motivations and thoughts, but we start to think about death in a different way. And we start to think about technology is not always good, right? And we transition into a period where technology starts to look a little bit like, to the general public, something to be a bit feared. And of course, we've seen it in other places, right? Outside of medicine and war, right? And other areas. But here, it's in clinical medicine. We have Karen Quinlan stuck on a respirator. That's what they called it at the time, right? And in 1976, by the way, what was the official position of the AMA when it came to withdrawing respirator support? It was that it was okay sometimes not to initiate it, but it was not okay once initiated to withdraw it. That was an unacceptable form of killing. All right? So this was very controversial, and she kind of embodied and symbolized people getting trapped a bit in technology, right? But what else did it do? We got every kind of ICU, baby Jane Doe, the Does, NICUs, the emergence of NICUs. We have MICUs and SICUs, and every kind of intensive care, right, going forward. And then Nancy Cruzan, it was medically assisted nutrition and hydration, which isn't particularly high tech, but still really matters, right? And it's not something that, in the Quinlan case, for example, Frank and Julia, her parents, even thought of. Karen Quinlan lived 10 years after she was withdrawn from the respirator, probably because she was weaned, and probably because the docs involved had qualms, which is an interesting thing. Okay, more work. The human genome. This is, and then later maybe a belated revolution with Jennifer Doudna and Emmanuel Charpentier, CRISPR-Cas9, right? 2 months before Doudna had the breakthrough with CRISPR, she's on a recorded interview talking about how gene editing, the way people are talking about it publicly, is the stuff of sci-fi. 2 months later, well, here we are, right? More work, though, more stuff that we can do. Now, in medicine, we developed, over 100 and some years, 160 medical specialties, subspecialties, just in the US here, and we probably have more than anyone else, but that's an awful lot, right? And the physician paradigm is really modeled on the scientist, physician-scientist. And it's become increasingly that, and less, the old art of medicine emphasis, physician as caregiver, right? But what's coming? What I think is coming is a type of technology that is a work reducer and will free up, hopefully, clinicians to do the things that they actually find to be more humanly meaningful. Now, there are perils here, because it could also free up hospital systems and others to boot clinicians out, right? So I'm not saying this happens automatically, but I see some real promise and not just peril. So will we have virtual encounters? We already have them. Task-specific or so-called weak AI, precision diagnosis, precision treatment options. This is coming, and it's just a matter of degree as we move down this road, right? Increasingly capable robotics. I think surgery will not be done by humans in the not-too-distant future. The machine doesn't need a cup of coffee. It doesn't get distracted because it's Valentine's Day and they forgot to get a card or whatever it is, right? This is not one of those problems that machines have to deal with, right? Low-skill things, getting a patient in and out of bed, that will probably also be replaced. I mean, my dad was an auto worker. The auto industry as we know it is, as he knew it, is completely gone, and robotics have replaced the vast bulk of auto workers even when jobs have been reshored, right? Plants are much smaller. They're not the Rouge up in, as it was with its many thousands of employees, right? Now, strong artificial AI, I think we'll have it, but I'm going to leave that to one side, because that's an AI that, could do everything that a human could do, at least mentally, intellectually, and, presumably with self-learning as well. So some examples. I think differential diagnosis will eventually be done much better by machines, by algorithms with good data. Entering information in the medical record. You'll be doing a history and physical, and it'll just be picked up the way that Zoom can take really good notes. Now, there are problems. We got glitches along the way. There's a lot of accuracy issues, and we need quality control and oversight, but that's where we're going. Coordination among a multiplicity of specialists could be tremendously, our 160 specialties could be tremendously benefited by AIs that interface us more and more seamlessly and also catch things that we don't catch, right? So this is where I think we're going. And, not tomorrow, but we're walking down this road. And we'll probably be jogging, 10 years from now, and maybe we'll be at a breakneck pace after that. Will this mean the end of medical practice? Well, will we no longer need humans for healthcare? I don't think so. I think we're still going to need health professions, including the medical profession, for various reasons, including, most importantly, what I would call the more human side of medicine. Things that are not low-hanging fruit for AI, right? Active listening, empathy, compassion, empowering patients to choose and navigate, being a fellow traveler of a sort, being a healer, right? You've all probably seen some of the research. It's pretty good. It's not great. On 40 seconds of expressed empathy seems to improve some outcomes in some patient populations, oncology, for example. It's really interesting. 1999 article, Linda Fogarty, kind of groundbreaking there, but there's been a lot of other work. I think that this is where medicine is going to go. Medical practice is going to go the direction of the medical humanist. And it's going to do some more. I think we're going to have, and we have a guy in our department trying to create this. This is a little twisted, but a specialist in being a generalist. And increasingly, I think that will become what the practice of medicine is. And the specialties, the high specialization, will kind of be taken over by the technology and by technique. Okay. Comprehensive care. Maybe we'll have something like comp care for each of us, where there's an interprofessional, interdisciplinary care team that kind of cradle, maybe not to grave, but handing off along the way with different specializations for this. Now, I know this is the North. This is where there's sufficient resources, but that's what I'm talking about for now. I actually think AI will help level because it will achieve some amazing cost savings that will allow for better care in even resource-poor areas, and maybe especially in resource-poor areas. Okay. In a way, I think where we're going is almost full circle. And, as Pam Davis and I used to talk about this, and Stan and I have talked about it a lot, Pam would say, so we're going to be shaman again, right? I wouldn't say shaman exactly, but yeah, that part of medicine that kind of got lost track of here in the last 60 years, 70 years, is probably, at least in my view, somewhat ironically, because of the emergence of AI, going to come again to be front and center in medical practice. Now, the human side of healthcare, this is also a hope. It's also aspirational. I'm not pretending there's an inevitability here, right? We got work to do. But I think care is going to come back into healthcare. And I think it's been pretty absent in really sad ways, right, for a long time. And I would just really be off if I didn't give you a Valentine from ChatGPT. In the world of circuits and lines of code, where data flows and algorithms abode, in this digital realm where I reside, I send you wishes far and wide. On this day of love, joy, and cheer, may your heart be full, your path be clear. In bits and bytes and language so grand, I extend my greetings across the land. Whether near or far, in pixels we meet, a virtual hug, a sentiment sweet. In this AI realm, where words convey Happy Valentine's Day in a digital way. That's straight out of ChatGPT, and it's not the expensive one. It's just the low-level 3.5. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Paul Marasco is an associate professor at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner Research Institute, Department of Biomedical Engineering, and associate staff at the Clinic Charles Shore Epilepsy Center. He directs the Laboratory for Bionic Integration, where neural machine interfaces are used to provide movement and touch sensation to prosthetic limbs so that individuals with amputation feel like the devices are part of their body. Wow, that sounds AI-ish. He also leads the Networks Center for Neural Exploration and Technology, NET, for investigating the brain network mechanisms of multisensory integration in epilepsy. Dr. Marasco is going to talk to us about workspace around functional interactions and cooperative relationships between AIs and humans, especially with respect to a shifting training focus in the direction of learning to interact with emerging technologies as our Valentine partners. Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Mark. Well, thanks, everybody. This is really fantastic, being able to sit and have these conversations about all of these different technologies and sort of, kind of a meaningful interaction about where we're going and how we're going, being a really critical piece of all this. And, I think the great irony in all of this is that I'm actually not even really a techie guy, as my lab mates will attest. And I always seem to get called into these kind of interactions with AI and technology, and I'm a terrible Luddite in the whole big scheme of things. But I mean, the question of AIs themselves, right? It's a really compelling and fascinating place. And I want to actually speak to one of the slides that you put up a little bit earlier. It's kind of the question that I'm interested in, and of course, since I come at this at kind of a strange angle, actually, I'm just going to throw a curveball right off the front. And I'm sorry that you had to put me first. But, here we are, right? So these AIs, right, for all the technological sort of sophistication and things that they are, where we're really interested in them is from the perspective of these being autonomous agents. Right. So these things, we've got a continuum of these devices or these technologies, and we don't necessarily know where we are. People have opinions about where we are from the perspective of them being agents, them being autonomous, them having sentience, which is all arguable and all these different things. But, in the big scheme of things, from my perspective, we're all just kind of Bayesian comparators. Right? We take information in, we compare that to what we think we should be, we take information in, we learn, we store that, and then we compare our idea of what the world should be with what we sense, and then we make a decision as to whether or not we feel like we did the right thing or achieved the right outcome or heading in the right direction. And then if it mismatches with what we think we correct, and if it matches with what we think, we're like, great, perfect, awesome, let's just go. And we don't pay a lot of attention to it. And what we don't necessarily do is, we don't really realize that us as individuals, we're just an interconnected series of autonomous systems, right? You don't need a brain to walk, right? You don't pay attention to what you do. You don't control the kinematics of your hand. You don't do any of those things, right? They all run at base level operational, sort of like base level operational systems. And then we're simply fooled into believing that we have control over them because they did what we thought we did what they told them to do, right? And that system that provides that update is that system that says, yes, you accomplished the goal that you intended to do, therefore you did what you needed to do, everything's great, perfect, go on to the next task, right? And so where I'm going to come from this, the question is as these AIs start to develop, right, we essentially, how do we actually look at them from the perspective of being cooperative joint agents, right? Cooperate with AIs exactly the same way we do with all of the systems that we already currently cooperate within our own selves, right? And then the idea is that, we're fearful of these devices, we're fearful of these technologies, yet from the educational perspective, how do we get out front of that fear and then actually start training ourselves to interact with the AIs and develop the AIs in ways that they actually can be perceived as being human, right? So actually take them to that next step so that we establish cooperative joint agency with them, and then instead of them being a threat, we work together, right? And now we're working on very hard problems together, but it's not perceived as this thing and me and my decision, that sort of seamlessness all starts to sort of blend together. And I think from an educational perspective, that's really where my personal opinion is where we should see this as an opportunity to sort of develop the AIs in ways so that they operate in a way that we find they in many respects kind of trick the system. Right? Make us believe that they're human, make us believe that they're something that we want to work with, therefore we both kind of augment each other's presence and then proceed forward. And the tricky part about that, right, one of the questions, particularly with medical technology, is where does that line of accountability reside, right? Because this is a technology, it's built, it exists, and if you start cooperating with it, who draws the line between, where your cooperate or where your accountability lies? And then kind of one of the questions, so Mark's slide I thought was really interesting, and I hope you can correct me if I misinterpret this. So the sense that sort of so empathetic listening, right, and engagement and walking the path with an individual, those are actually, let's call them skills, that an AI actually probably is pretty good at, right? They're going to sit and they're going to listen, they're going to respond appropriately. And is that now even things that we think are necessarily the realm of human beings? And I'm not sure which angle you were taking. Was it that this is what the physicians will be able to do versus the AIs, or this is where AI is probably going to take us? That's the second one.
We'll do that in the discussion. But my view is AI is going to free us up to do those kinds of things. It is also the case that I think long-term AIs will actually do those things well too. But I think that's much further down the road.
I don't know. I think
Maybe not.
yeah. I mean, it's terrifying how comfortable people become. And if we get our heads around actually getting these things, right? So here we are. How do we even talk about them in the big scheme of things? But, how do we get these technologies to actually interact with this as though we just kind of are like, oh, good, great, we'll work together, everything's fine, you do what you need to do, and then we proceed forward. And I think, right, we're at the 5 minutes, and I think that's most of where I'm coming at this from. Yeah. All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Our next panelist is Xavier Williams. Mr. Williams has a master's degree in biomedical engineering from CWRU. He's a research assistant in our Department of Bioethics. He and I have lots of really interesting and fun conversations about this stuff. And what Mr. Williams is going to do is talk about some of the educational aspects of AI, both from the side of the pedagogy, but also student use.
Good evening, everyone. Bit nervous. It's the first time ever doing this, so bear with me. But yeah, so we've already talked about how interesting AI is right now, but I've got to say that, and if any of you have actually done any delving into it, you would know what I'm about to say. It is quite the alarming thing to realize a tool that we designed is capable of doing things that we thought were highly complex. Like, for example, being able to figure out a whole circuit. Earlier, I was testing GPT to see how well it could design a circuit for me. Now, it can't necessarily tell me exactly what to do, but it can give me like advice and things around what can actually be done with the circuit itself. This is all to say that ChatGPT, Google's AI, all these different AIs, they can work effectively at training and teaching students. And the idea behind what we would want to do with this is we want students, or we would want faculty alongside their students to essentially train their own AI and develop that AI over time. Now, a lot of the questions that were presented by Mark and even Paul about how we are looking at AI, how important it is, how it's going to redefine us to a certain degree. These are all valid questions, especially when it comes down to education. I would say, to answer those questions, I would say that over time, as we get to learn it better, and weak AI becomes strong AI, which becomes general AI, it will become more and more a part of our lives, much like the internet has become a part of our lives, for better or for worse. This is where the warning comes in. We need to get ahead, as Paul said, get ahead of this fear, get ahead of these worries about AI, get ahead of this trajectory that we're going on, and really try to ground ourselves in a reality, in the reality where AI can actually be a benefit to us and help us survive coming issues that we have. As we know, we have climate change, we have all these different problems that are going on throughout the whole entire planet. it'd be great if we had something else that we designed that can kind of think like us, that can kind of act like us, that can kind of help us to come up with new ways of developing new technologies and new theories to help us move forward in the world. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Our next panelist is Mark Griswold, who I envy because he gets to use the HoloLens a lot. Mark is the Pavey Family Professor of Innovative Imaging, Professor of Radiology, Director of MRI Research at Case Western Reserve University here and University Hospitals. He has secondary appointments in biomedical engineering, physics, electrical engineering, computer science. Dr. Griswold is going to address how bad we are at understanding the scale of computation and how this relates to our understanding of AI. And he's going to pull on the large language models a little bit, which we're looking forward to that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks for inviting me here. As Mark said, I was going to talk about imaging, but I decided to really ask a different question, which is why in the world are we talking about this now? Because we had, analog systems built on tubes back in 1943, which were self-aware in a way. They had perfect feedback. I was doing neural net stuff back in the 90s. Why in the world are we talking about this now? And I want to basically answer this by 2 points. And the first one I want to talk about is how bad humans are at scale. And I want to start with just a simple question, like we throw around $1 million budgets and billion-dollar budgets and trillion-dollar budgets as if they're just kind of the same thing in a way. But I want to ask you, how long is 1,000 seconds? Can somebody tell me? It's about 16 minutes, okay? It's like 16 and a half minutes. How about 1,000,000 seconds? About 12 days? So still something part of our lives. So, okay, how about 1 billion seconds now? It's almost 31 and a half years, right? Which I used to think was like in the 80s, but it's not. It's the 90s. So how about 1 trillion seconds? 31,000 years. So we would have been underneath 2 miles of ice. So we as humans can understand some of those things in reality, but we cannot. I have no idea what 31,000 years feels like. I can barely understand what 30 years feels like. But when we talk about computers, we just throw these things around like they're nothing. So my first computer had 1,000 bytes, 1 kilobyte, 1980. Then it took till 1990 and I had 1 megabyte of RAM, 1,000,000 bytes. And then sometime around 2000, I got 1 gigabyte. And now I'm at a terabyte, right? And I carry around 1 terabyte in my pocket. And so I'm carrying around the equivalent of 31,000 years compared to what I had in 1980. And the assertion I'm going to make is I have no idea how to represent that in my mind, the same way I have no idea how 31,000 years feels. So that's one part of it. We're really bad. So when we throw around terms like long-term, short-term, all of these kind of things, we have no freaking idea, okay? So that's number one. And this has particularly hit in the last 18 months with respect to large language models, because all along these computer networks have been building up technology and abilities at a rate that, again, we can't understand. And in the last 18 months, we finally hit a boundary where things are changing. And in my mind, I want to go back to a book by Kevin Kelly from 2010. It's titled, What Does Technology Want? And as a part of that, he talks about the critical nature of language in our minds. And his assertion, and there's a lot of data out there that says that this is true, is that language is the fundamental organization of our brain. So I can look at the stage and I can see that's wood. I can have a word for that. I know wood comes from trees, which are outside, which are those things that grow out of the ground. They grow leaves, and the leaves are pretty in the spring, and I hate raking in the fall. So I can get from these words to this language to how I feel. And the core thing about language is that if somebody else has that same organization in their brain, I can now take my knowledge and transfer that to them. And that's how we can propagate technology and other ideas from one person to another through language. Now, in the past, this has been nearly impossible for a computer. You had to have a computer degree to speak a language that a computer could understand. You had to understand how the computer was organized, then you could talk to the computer and get answers back. What's changed in the last 18 months is that these large language models are now good enough that they actually understand how we think. They understand English, they understand all of these other languages, which are the core to how we're organized, how we think. And now we can communicate with it and ask the computer questions, and it will answer back, hey, you as humans think this way. So we can hand it a medical report. We were talking about summaries earlier. Tell me what's going on in this medical report, and it says, you humans think this way. Let me tell you what I think about this. I've also in the last year learned how to speak Python, which is a computer language, and ChatGPT taught me that. So the computer is telling me, I'm asking it a question, how would you, computer, do something? And it's telling me, here's how I think. I know how you think, human. Here's how to do this task that you want. This is really new. This was not possible 2 years ago. This is barely possible 18 months ago. So the medical implications are massive. So now we do have this ability to make an agent that thinks like we think, or at least can understand how we think and can communicate with us. It's the same thing. I go on for images. It's the same kind of deal. It understands how we would describe an image in our language, and that allows us to have an understanding and to now call on all of the other computer tools that we've built, which may not have any organizational relationship to us. Now we can plug into them and make agents that are powerful way beyond belief. Right now we've got basically like first-year med students or postdocs. They're really good. We can ask them questions. They're going to get a lot better. So let's see what goes on. Thank you.
The next speaker is virtual, and so we'll need our tech folks to get her up here. This is Dr. Laura Jahey. Dr. Jahey is Professor of Neurology and Chief Research Information Officer for the Cleveland Clinic Health System. She is the executive lead of the Discovery Accelerator, a 10-year strategic partnership with IBM Research to accelerate scientific discovery through high-performance computing, AI, and quantum computing. Dr. Jahey will discuss the divide between AI research and AI implementation in medical practice, and maybe a little bit on the possible future of AI in the world of
Thank you. Okay, I see okay, good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. First off, I want to apologize for not being there in person. Today is my clinic day, and I just finished seeing patients. So it was either not participate at all or at least be there virtually. And this was too important to miss. So thank you for putting up with me on the screen. I've truly enjoyed listening to everyone, and I can't help but think, the joke of an ethicist, an engineer, and a physician walk into a room, and then what's going to come out of it. So it's fascinating how our brain works. I'm a neurologist, so that's my clinical practice, is I see patients who have epilepsy. So I've been working in how the brain works and is wired, and how intelligence is defined and operates right since I finished medical school. So that's why perhaps for me, the whole concept of, all these questions and challenges that we're struggling with AI, for me, they sound just natural. I don't see it really, and that would be different, I think, from what we're hearing, it's not really that different from any technology. From when technology started, really its role can be simplified in three things. Any technology is good if it can help us either do things better, faster, or cheaper. Any invention that really took off and persisted in society did that because it was able to do one of these three things really well. If we went back to the cavemen, right, I bet for them, the idea that someday somebody might be able to do something and then fire starts, that would have sounded very revolutionary and very unnatural and very scary. Every scientific advance is a leap. Otherwise, nobody, would care for it. It would come and die. The fact that it stayed, it would be because it was a leap that was positive along one of these three directions: the better, faster, cheaper. And no technology is inherently good or bad. So that's why, for me, even the discussion, the conversation about AI is good or AI is bad. AI is a technology, the same as any technology. And the way we use it is either good or bad. At the end of the day, knowing what I know about the brain, I guess, I don't think there is a technology that will do what the human brain can do. And what the maturity, right? Like, we make decisions because of experiences that we went through, because of emotions that we go through. It's not just about how networks are wired in our brain. It's how we are wired in our society, how we are wired in our community. So when, our value as physicians is beyond what a technology can reproduce. And it was just fascinating to me. I took notes, when Mark was talking, that at the end of the day, his conclusion was that the value of AI was that it will help us create specialists in being a general medical humanist, if I took the notes correctly. And that is the art of medicine. So to conclude that the value of this technology is that at the end of the day, it is allowing us as physicians to be more available for the art of medicine in and of itself is something to reckon with, right? Like for us to really think about. So the role of technology, the not being inherently good or bad. The perfect example there is actually Nobel, right? Like, he invented dynamite to help people with mining and with building. And we ended up using for all kinds of other things. It's not the fault of the dynamite, it's the fault of what we decided as humans to do with it. So these are just reflections from what I heard. Now, I have 2 minutes left. So let's talk about what I was originally planning to talk about, which is the divide between research and practice with AI. And that divide for me was important to highlight because at the end of the day, I believe that the purpose of science is to help us help each other, right? Like, it is to make people's lives better. And we could spend a lot of time developing AI algorithms in medicine that are very interesting and very exciting on paper. But as long as they don't, for them to have the benefit, they have to make it to clinical practice. They have to be integrated in our clinical practice. And there is a big divide between where the research is and how many papers we publish, say, applying different AI algorithms, and how many even are FDA approved. There's like now close to 700 AI algorithms that are FDA approved, versus what is actually integrated and used in clinical practice. And that divide is, again, much more human than anything else and systemic. It applies to why individuals adopt AI or not, and it applies to why organizations adopt AI or not. And it is anchored on these four pillars very well summarized in a paper by the National Academy, actually, if anybody's interested. And they talk about the means, the method, the desire, and the reason. So for us to integrate these algorithms in clinical practice, we need to have the means to do so, right? Like if you're in the middle of nowhere and you don't have the compute capacity in your hospital system to do all the compute that's necessary on the spot, you don't have those resources, even if that tool is theoretically available, you're not going to use it. The method, it has to fit with our clinical workflow, our clinical practice. It has to make our job easier. Otherwise, we won't do it. Remember the better or the faster. The desire, we have to trust it, right? We're very suspicious. If we don't know where those explanations or those predictions are coming from, we don't trust it. ChatGPT can do whatever it wants, right? But when you read it, if you really know the subject matter and you see that it's making stuff up, then you won't trust it with other things. And then the reason, the incentives have to align. Like at the clinic, for example, we are using AI to help us with nursing allocation and with OR scheduling. So we apply it to our system because it made sense. Like these particular applications made sense. We have the infrastructure, all of these means, method, desire, incentives aligned. I dream of a future where we can not be threatened by technology. We shouldn't really. And move beyond AI. Maybe I already moved, Paul knows, we spend a lot of time now in my group thinking about quantum computing. And for us, AI is the present and the quantum is what we're looking at next. And how do we make that transition? And that's how it should be. We should continue to evolve and, take it for whatever it's worth. I will stop here. Thank you.
Our last panelist is Dr. Fulai Jin. Dr. Jin is Associate Professor in the Department of Genetics and Genome Sciences. His research focuses on transcription regulation, 3D genome architecture, and single-cell genomics. And he's going to talk about AI in disease genetics and genomics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the opportunity for me, give me this opportunity to talk about AI in research in genetics. So I was told to talking about this talk for 5 minutes. I actually write a script here, and after listening to you guys, I feel like this is not very helpful. So as a scientist who runs a research lab, my lab does have a lot of first-hand experience working with the so-called machine intelligence technology, machine learning, deep learning. Before the popular idea of AI was actually taking shape in the last maybe 1 or 2 years. I think the general public was really impressed after ChatGPT comes out that it actually can answer all the questions you asked, and it can be creative, like write a poem and something like that. So from a science point of view, I guess today I mostly want to talk about the AI's, what AI can do and what's the limitation of AI in research. So I think from my own perspective, AI is really good at answer question. AI really good at help us answer the question. But its problem is its limitation is limited by the data it's trained with. Another limitation is actually not good at ask questions. So in terms of clinical in terms of genetics, I think I'm working on the genomics, the field of genomics. So among the entire field of biomedical research, genomics or computation biology is probably the biggest impacted by AI, by machine learning method in the past 10 years. If you ask me about what's the AI, the future of AI in genetics, I would say it will eventually will be the genome medicine. This is actually the major vision by my so-called home funding institute, NHGRI. So the idea, I think after this past 10 years of 20 years, the developing of sequencing technology is no longer a dream that one day in front the doctors will have every patient will have their genome information in front of the doctor. But how to interpret those sequencing information is the difficult part. So there are only a few examples that we know of that certain, for example, mutation would definitely cause disease, such as BRCA mutation, PTEN mutation would give you very highly likely to give you cancer. But in most other non-cancer diseases, what's most likely going to happen is that a combination of multiple mutations give you slightly increase the risk of the disease, and it's very hard for a scientist, a doctor, to recognize what the combination is. But AI has a huge potential because it has a very strong ability to recognize the pattern and to extract information, extract knowledge from the big data. It has a very big potential to integrate different types of data. So I think that this is the opportunity for the entire biomedical research field, including genomics, especially the genomics field. So, so this genomics. So in the past 10 years, I have been seeing my research being so deeply impacted by the deep learning progresses. The other day, I haven't been writing code myself since I started my lab, but I noticed that my students started using ChatGPT to write code for them. So yesterday I actually saw an interview with Jensen Huang, who is the CEO of NVIDIA. His opinion is that like maybe 5 years ago, if you ask what you want your kids to learn in school, everybody, and including himself, will tell that, oh, your kid has to learn computer science. He has to learn how to programming, as this is a must-have skill sets. But now his opinion is that this is all wrong. The creation of AI is actually we're free. Nobody needs to learn how to code, and because the AI actually free us from this, so that we can focus on other questions. So then the interviewer asked Jensen Huang, what's the next thing? That he said, if I'm going to start again, I'm going to look at life science, biology, life sciences, which is very, very encouraging. So I would, so I think let me go back to the question about why. So what's the AI? What's the limitation of AI from the genomics point of view? In the past, when we studied the connection between genetics to disease, the earliest effort is to collect the genotype information just based on, a list of SNPs, genotyping, and connect it to the disease status, the clinical data, looking for the association and tell you which gene might be responsible for which disease, right? So, so that is the old. That is the old type. That with AI, for example, now it can help us like to obtain digitalize the clinical information. For example, imagings now can be extracted as a trait to associate those information that people used not be able to associate. Now we can associate to genetics, obtain more insights. On the other hand, there are also, but what AI cannot predict is that nowadays we have so much more technology, more types of data can come and can be used to work with AI. For example, the DNA sequencing, people used to use the SNP array. Now we have DNA sequencing. Now we have long-read sequencing. We can look at not only how DNA is mutated, we can also see how DNA is reorganized, deleted, amplified, those kind of things. So with AI, but the strength of AI is that when you have so much different types of data, it's so good at integrate them, so that you don't need to free us from making the effort coming up with a solution ourselves to do this, to the integration and the generating information. So I think that is the opportunity that all the scientists should jump on. If we ignore this type of, and we cannot, we will be falling behind. So finally, I just want to briefly raise a few points about the limitation. So I already mentioned that data quality is an issue that the AI might have, because AI dependent on training data. But if your data quality is bad, has bias, has limitations, what you get, garbage in or garbage will be coming out of the AI. Secondly, for genetic study, there is unsaturated bias. It's very known that the data we used is often biased towards a certain population people. Underrepresented population can be often being missed by current AI model. So we have to think about how to improve that. And thirdly, the privacy issue. So AI taking everybody's data. How do we guarantee, something like a personalized medicine to balance that with your privacy and still benefit from AI? That's the other question I'm lately started to appreciate. So that's all. Probably over time already. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
We're going to open it up for questions. We got to turn our little hand mics on. Significant conversations, that's what this is supposed to be. So please jump in, ask questions. We covered a lot of ground, and there's lots more to discuss.
So I would like to ask about the way we're defining AI here, because here you're definitely trying to sum up a lot of different things under the umbrella of AI. We're talking about prosthetics, we're talking about surgical robots, we're talking about assistant help, we talk about diagnosis, we talk about genome sequencing. And it seems to me like these are very wildly different studies that is being grouped under AI. And a lot of the times, and I've seen this in a couple of other descriptions of AI, that seems to make it more than it's just about machine learning, which is what most of these models about. And my biggest concern with this definition of AI is just how it's been very much often used by companies in order to push for very aggressive misappropriation of fundings as well as displacement of workforce. For example, the National Eating Disorder Association recently, only 8 months ago, tried to fire out most of their staff for the hotline and replace them with chatbots, which cause irreparable damage to their patients. And as you said, when this displacement of workforce happens, you will be extremely vulnerable to biases in your data, as you mentioned, with stuff like sexism and racial profiling, which is notorious in the medical field. So I was wondering, is this a good way to approach this as the new and exciting piece of technology that we should all be hyped about? Or is this more like an investment scam that is very much similar to how the metaverse and NFTs has come before it?
You made a good point there, where there's a level of evangelizing when it comes down to AI. That's the term I would use for it. In which case, I would say that, I wouldn't compare it to Meta or to any of those other systems, mainly because those aren't developing anything new. Like, the whole thing about Meta is that, they were supposed to be creating like this VR chat, but VR chat has existed for over a decade. And the LLM AI model is also not necessarily new, but its capacity at this point is, I won't say new in of itself, it's new to us. And it's something that we have to basically play around with and try to understand how it works. Like with a lot of technologies that are relatively new for us. So we're gonna have these situations where you have people, a panel like us, talking about it and talking about its benefits, but also talking about its constraints. As you were saying yourself in your own example, there is irreparable damage to the patients because they fired the whole staff. Why? Because they put a chat bot up instead of having a person that's able to sit there and empathize and discuss with you and go back and forth. But there are other things that we brought up already that the chatbot can work decently at, which is pattern recognition. So this is a new technology. It's a new technology that is going to evolve. It's going to and the whole idea is to try to get ahead of of that exact thing that you were bringing up. Of somebody evangelicalizing it, to the point where we're not properly using it and we don't know what's up or down for this technology. I hope I answered your question. Yes.
If I could just add, I want to echo something that Laura said, and it's something that I think is important for us as a medical school. This is a human technology still. This isn't like some alien drop down, ChatGPT. This is something that we've made. And I think, we have a department of ethics that is here for a reason, because we have to make decisions around technology. As Laura said, we can take, so we had LeVar Burton in the lab, and he's really a wonderful man. And he sat and he said, look, this could be like a knife, right? You can either use it to smear butter on your toast in the morning, or you can kill somebody with it. It can be a tool or a weapon, both ways. Everything that we build can be that way. And, we as a school should be out leading in the ethical use and application of AI in medicine. It's an unknown problem that we have.
My greatest concerns about the technology are the humans behind it. I think there's a great danger that the technology might increase income inequity. And I also think we need to give serious thought to the ecological impact, because these supercomputers, whether it's Bitcoin and I put that together, and AI may destroy us by essentially its energy drain and heat generation. But my question relates to work we've been doing for decades on care robots, creating empathetic care robots. And my interest is not in natural intelligence and artificial intelligence. It's actually in symbiotic wisdom. It's what can the two together do? What could a robot help in caring for somebody? And what is Mark, as Mark said earlier, Mark Ausilio, what is the unique contribution that humans play in that role? And I'll end my comment by mentioning ELIZA, because one of the first very primitive efforts, and by the way, I loved your stories about the dangers of this, was a very simple program that could do psychotherapy in a Rogerian mode by essentially reflecting back what the patient said. I hate my mother, tell me more about your mother, or whatever. And people felt that that was a real therapist, including the secretary of the man who programmed it. So I do think people project onto computers, their phones and devices, a range of human emotions which don't come from the device, they come from the human being. So I really think in terms of empathetic robots and empathetic humans, we really need to understand that dimension of relationship Thank you. I think that was the question. Do we have to understand a deeper notion of relationship between computers and people?
That reminds me of some of your comments, Paul. How's that? I just pitched that to you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting sort of feature of this, right? Because we do project on, we anthropomorphize and project onto these devices. But an interesting piece of this equation is you'll notice, like, a lot of people don't like your analog brakes, right? A lot of people get really frustrated with their phone. We actually have neural mechanisms that inhibit our ability to engage appropriately or cooperate with a technology that we don't perceive as being another individual or another knowing agent with empathy and an understanding of who we are, right? Because that seems to be the breakdown. And the work that we do, we're very curious about those lines, like where they're established and what they do and how they work. But, you know, I agree with the idea of the cooperative relationships between these two augmenting and helping each of those two sort of entities to proceed forward to do greater and better things together. But, you know, it's an interesting sort of piece of that because, you know, to kind of play to the earlier question about like what the AI is, you know, I don't know, I think it was like 4 years ago, there was actually a breakthrough. I have a colleague up at University of Alberta, and one of the breakthroughs was that the AIs themselves no longer needed programming, that they actually engaged in experiential learning, and that was probably the single biggest technological advancement of these technologies that nobody really understood or appreciated at the time. And so now it's kind of a question of like they're gaining some level of autonomy, and you know, we can talk about what that is, but then, you know, back to the question of what it is that we need, right? Where do we start drawing those lines, and how do we start engaging with these technologies as they start sort of traversing those boundaries that we set? And to your medical, like your empathy robots, what is empathy, right? Like, what's that line where our inability to distinguish constructed empathy or artificial empathy from actual empathy, right? How does that actually work? And what happens when the machines actually can engage in appropriate empathy?
Yeah, and actually, on that point, it's not clear, at least from some of the studies that suggest better outcomes with 40 seconds of empathy, that the empathy has to be genuine, whatever that might mean. And of course, it's very possible that it matters to one person because they have a certain kind of assessment, and it doesn't matter to another, right? It's also interesting just to think about, like you said, the frustrations in our own experience, right? I play Words with Friends. They're not really friends. They're just, you know, whatever. And then I recently realized that some of the games I've been playing for some years, not a ton, are just, they're just Words with Friends robots. And I have to admit, I don't play them anymore. And I'm not mad at them, you know, it's not, I don't like it. And I can't tell you exactly why, right? I do also want to underscore something you said when in your initial remarks, which is, you know, we delude ourselves in lots of ways. We've spent most of, well, as far as I can tell, human history, scale duly acknowledged, telling ourselves how radically different we are from the rest of nature, right? And the scala natura, and we're the crown, right? And it doesn't really look like that, right? And it's not clear to me that even the activities that I think, I will say in the longer haul, well, in short haul, humans will be doing in clinical settings because they're freed up to do them, the art of medicine, right? That there might not be empathy bots or whatever that can do these really well. But I just see that as further down. Now, there is this interesting case of about a year ago of a German man who got in a relationship with a chatbot. I mean, we don't know if what's been reported is fully accurate, but felt it was romantic and ended up killing himself, partly because he was asking questions about whether the species can survive. And I happen to think that, if the species is going to survive, that we're going to need AIs of various types, and we're going to also need to be able to overcome our, some of you have heard me say before, our in-group, out-group, and understand that there is no them, there's just a we, that's it.
Thank you very much. This is very much informative, and I think it raises a lot of questions and keeps the conversation around AI and its uses. And I'll take the privilege of it being a conversation. So actually, I want to share an experience about the use of AI in medical education. I am Nihal Khamis. I'm an adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University, and I'm responsible for the integration of generative AI into the courses of the Masters of Education in Health Professions. In addition, I am a principal investigator for the Johns Hopkins Delta Award project about making faculty development more intelligent. How can we increase the value, access, and equity of faculty development for educators? And I'm the founder and CEO of SmartMed Ed Solutions here in Cleveland. So, I apologize for this long introduction. I just wanted to clarify where the background is coming for what I'm going to share. So, we've started working on the integration of generative AI into the curriculum development course of our MEHP program at Hopkins. And we had a lot of conversation about how we can integrate this and how can we assure that we're taking the advantages of such integration without belittling the cognitive work that our fellows should be doing and developing during the course. So we ended up by having a parallel training. So we engineered prompts for each of the 6 steps of curriculum development, but we were releasing them to the fellows just after they submit their assignment for this step. So for instance, if they are stating their educational objectives for the course that they are developing, they submit this, and then we send to them the prompts and they start working on it. And they share with us and we provide them with individualized feedback. So what we have learned out of this? First, you need to be yourself an expert in order to be able to verify the type of output that you're getting from the chatbot. And I could see the promise in the more specialized GPTs where you can train them so that you guarantee the type of output that's coming out. The good part about this experience is that we've broken a little bit of that type of psychological barrier, being afraid to get into the experience of using generative AI. At the same time, because they have already studied, worked, and submitted, they were able to send us their critique of the output that they are receiving. So this was like getting them into more of another skill of evaluation and critical appraisal and review of the content that they are having. So this is regarding, the feedbacks were really good, and we're considering integrating it not as a parallel training anymore. The second part is in the capstone research projects, and here we're working on this currently and trying to have the balance between in which assignments they can use it for generation of information and which ones is to be used only for provision of feedback and opportunities for enhancement. As a member, as the chair of the Faculty Development Committee of the American College of Surgeons a few years ago, we have realized that only 30% of the surgery training programs are having dedicated medical educators within the programs. And as someone who empathizes a lot with our faculty, because many instances we come to our departments and say that we're applying, for instance, entrustable professional activities. And we give some guidelines and we assume that everyone is an expert in curriculum development or whatever. So there is a huge potential up here. If we've worked on training specific GPTs, and we're training one now for curriculum development. So when you have this GPT access to it, you can develop your curricula, your own, with the quality of a professional medical educator. This can help providing access to high quality courses, opportunities for the planning of evaluation and assessment, and even research. Another final experience to share, I've consulted for the case Western School of Medicine for the they are trying to find solutions for the cancellation of the USMLE Clinical Skills Step 2. And I want to say that we've used generative AI, and it was quite helpful, not only in the administrative part of doing things, because I was able to have formulas where we used for like curriculum mapping. You can compile a list of like a national benchmark of what are the clinical skills that are that were commonly used, like in USMLE Step 2, the canceled one, within just few minutes. You can compare your curriculum, your current curriculum, to those lists with comments, even finding like what might be corresponding or similar, corresponding but not, I mean, exactly similar. And we have trained ChatGPT to develop cases for clinical skills assessment with various degrees of complexity. And I would say the final word that we were able to do this was interprofessional collaboration. So as you have mentioned, ChatGPT can be one of your teams. So we were working together, 2 or 3 people, we're using Zoom, we're working, sharing screen, working on ChatGPT, and clinicians are giving input into what do they want in the scenario, what's the level of complexity. So try this, try that. Working together, we have reached many things. So for medical education, there are huge potentials for the use of generative AI. We need ethical guidelines. You can refer to the ones recently published by Johns Hopkins University. They provide a lot of guidance. Interprofessional teams working with the ChatGPT is quite important. Having assignments for the undergrad and giving them some example engineered prompts where they can see where the value can come with a little of like the disadvantages, I think is something quite important. They are using it anyways. So it's better to give them a framework to go through. I apologize for my lengthy comment.
Those were excellent comments regarding the importance in medical education. Thank you.
Very excellent comments about medical. Actually, it'd be great if you could share that with us more technically, because you made an excellent point. The students are already using this technology, so we're on the back slope already. So we have to, as faculty and staff, what we'd have to do is create this framework for them to properly use it. And I have a few colleagues in New York that are PhD candidates that are trying to do that themselves. And the final thing is, you're right. AI has a huge potential in medical education, and that's because of its adaptability and the fact that it acts as like an intersectional, I guess, vortex for different professionals that have their own specialty, and it can act as like a bridge between them, essentially. So if you can build that and also do that with students at their level and create interdisciplinary students that also have learned from ChatGPT and each other, I think it would be a really, really helpful.
So my question is about software that was made by Stanford in like the mid-'70s called Mycin that was used to predict bacterial infections, but was never really deployed in practice due to concerns over like the legal and ethics as well as technology. if this software were to be deployed today, do you think that we've kind of overcome some of those legal concerns? And how would the advances in technology make a software like this more effective in a clinical practice?
I think I'm not the legal expert, but this is an area where, again, we need an immense amount of help. I don't think it's solved right now, and the court cases are going to be happening in the next few years. I don't think that the U.S. court system has established where liability begins and ends. Mark would agree. I think this is, again, I just want to keep reflecting back. Like, this is a tool that we can use, and we need to, like, we don't have the answers right now, but we need to be the ones who are out front trying to find the answers. That's the argument I'm going to make to the faculty here.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's an issue of, the lawyers in any healthcare system, in any clinical practice, their incentive, right, their priority is to minimize risk and protect the organization, protect the individuals who work there, which are the physicians. Then you have, on the other hand, the researchers who develop that software, their priority is they want to get it out, right? To get that credibility and that acknowledgement. And the clinicians just want to take care of people. So until we figure out where that liability line sits, in case of a problem, like say the AI, it's not just with this, there is the same issue with this particular software that you're talking about. The same issue exists with, computer vision algorithms that can help with detecting, guessing the risk of a lesion, say on a skin, being skin cancer versus it being benign, or informing pathologists when they're looking at slides. The way we've dealt with it so far is by keeping the ultimate liability be in the hands of the physician. So we are requiring that no matter what that AI says, it needs that human to review the conclusion and where it came from, and then make a decision. And if a problem stems from that decision, then it is that decider's issue. It is not the AI that informs. So that's how we've been, operating so far. And maybe that's the way it should be. Although when you make this argument to the computer scientists and engineers who are developing these algorithms, they come back with, well, who's to say that the human is always correct? When we do our exercises in validating these algorithms, many times we end up finding that you humans can't even agree among each other. And there are many examples of that in medicine, whether it's in imaging or path, or like in my field with looking at brain waves with EEG. You show the same thing to 10 experts, human experts, and you come up with 10 different interpretations. And who's right, who's wrong? But yet we have no problem with that ambiguity when it is ambiguity between different humans making the decision. But we have a lot of problems with that ambiguity when it is between a human and a machine, right? Which is where it is sort of an artificial split here. So you could take it with the superficial answer that I first gave about you just inform and then the clinician makes the decision and all that. Or you could take it to that deeper layer, which is understanding where that line lies, and fairness, really, between how much weight are we putting on decisions made by humans versus informed by machines or by predictive models.
I think that was an excellent discussion that actually addressed what I think were two questions that were posted in the chat, which had to deal with the need that you still need that human component, and touched a little bit on bias, both with AI as well as I would conversely argue with humans, right? And then the liability issue. There are two more questions. There are at least 3 hands up in the audience. We've got 2 minutes. So whoever can shoot their hand up first.
My question goes back to your slide, Mark, and
Dr. Jahy spoke about it, and you spoke about it, and this young person over here. The way that we're using the chat GPT or the AI models to inform medicine and to practice medicine in the future, and we talked about these different biases that we have that are inherent in how they learn and the models that you give them. It seems to me that we need to change the paradigm of how we practice medicine. You talked about the art of medicine, and we're talking about it in this sort of like utopian sense of we want to make people better to live longer and healthier lives, but that's not the reality, at least not in the US, as medicine is practiced, where it's a business. So if we're giving the prompt like, how can I get this person out of the hospital the fastest and get another person in, then are we really giving the best care? You know, and if we've got, you know, biases, like the historical biases, some people don't have access to healthcare, so they're not in the system. So they come in, well, this guy is, you know, he's African American, he's probably got like, you know, poor kidney health. Let's just put him on the donor list and shunt him over to dialysis and get this guy in here and get him a new kidney when that guy dies. You know, so how do we address that part of it before we implement it as a tool for the better, if you will?
ChatGPT will refuse to give you the answer you're seeking. They will always be extremely defensive. I tried that again and again and again with ChatGPT. So they will give you everything that is correct and appropriate as an approach and so forth. But they will not go to the core of the question. They never, ever go to the core of the question.
I actually had the exact opposite experience with ChatGPT, where it will tell me, well, these are different things that you can do and different systems that you can use to actually resolve it. And this system's good and these systems are not. And I think it's a matter of prompting it if you're going to ask it those questions. But let's deal with that questions as just like people right now, since it's more of a problem of us, I would say. And my answer to that question is that we have to really recognize what it is about these different systems that we use, our medical industry, our transportation industry, all of our industries, and try to figure out a way to inherently make them equitable. And not just that, but we also need to be willing to let certain aspects of them go. What those aspects are, I don't know. That's why we have to do a huge review on them, but that's what I would say to answer your question, is that this is a good chance to review how our systems work and how we actually look at things. Because you're right, you know, sure, this is going to be a great technology for people in the city, but if you go out into the countryside, you know, how many people even know about it, let alone know how to use it, know how to make it work, know how to get it to, you know, to an educational system like we were just talking about. And then you start adding other aspects of disparity and other aspects of basically digital barriers, essentially, and not just digital barriers, but medical barriers as well. So this is just an ongoing question in general, and it just adds more complexity to it because of the AI. However, I think that AI can help us develop a system that works better, and I think that together with each other and with open minds, we can develop systems that can be more equitable, like we want it to be in that utopian reality. May not be there, may not actually literally get there, but it's a chance.
What we should address first and how, I think one of the really exciting pieces of this is it's made a lot of these problems impossible to ignore. Right? Because we came in, said, hey, we know things should be this way, and then we find out that we're not, right? And that they're not. And then, you know, the technologies, I wouldn't say that the technologies are necessarily revealing to us that things, you know, that these problems are endemic and pervasive. Yet the dialogue that they've started to establish is making, you just can't ignore that anymore, right? Like, hey, like the technology shined a light on that. Nobody can just sweep it under the rug. And I think, you know, whether or not there's an answer moving forward, the nice thing is that the discussion is occurring and it can't be ignored, right? And so I think that's a net benefit of the particular place and time that we are now, and hopefully we proceed forward and behave appropriately as we try and get these things worked out.
You're absolutely right about the biases. The thing I would like to point out is if we make these AI systems that, for example, I'm in radiology, if we can read scans faster, let's say, we're going to maybe be more efficient on our side. That's great, and maybe companies will make more money or whatever. But that same AI system could give radiology access to the 3 billion people in the world who have no radiology access at all. Exact same system. And so we have to make the choices as humans how we're going to deploy that. And I think that's the real opportunity, is those 3 to 5 billion people who have no access to the kind of stuff that we do here in Cleveland. And we have a chance there.
Right. Amen. What we value, what we care about, and how those values inform our development and use of technology, including AIs, is absolutely fundamental. And at least at the current stage, AIs pretty much suck at conceptual work and value work. All right. Thank you very much. Let's join us for a reception out for the next half hour.